PETA, podcast every day in April, where during the month of April you'll hear about different topics and different stories and discussions that I have on my mind and on my heart to discuss and address for this month. It may be sports related, it may be stuff related. You may even hear some guests on the show that you may haven't even seen or heard from me addressing on the show. But this is PETA, and this is Podcast Every Day in April. Hope you enjoy. What is good, y'all? The Past is back with yet another episode, continuing the podcast every day in April. I'm your host, BT. We are on episode 179, and I thought I would do something a little basic, but a little complex in a sense, because a lot of people, it's been now, we're looking at this 2018, we're looking at 3 years since I've began, let alone consistently flowed with the Team Apple option. So I'll give my backstory to that and then kind of present it as to what leads us to where we are now, because a lot of people have their angst of Apple, and I get it. Apple is very proprietary. It is very picky when it comes to if you're utilizing apps. I know most people, as far as rooting or jailbreaking or hacking in to use their devices to their max potential, you're limited to that in most instances with Mac. And those are things that if that's your route or your preference, I get it. But the streamline, and I know a lot of people use like the Ecoverse term, or everything just kind of streamlines according to, those are kind of like the immediate factors that come into play as far as what makes Apple the better option for, those who do or don't go that route. So I'll give my backstory of Apple, and then I'll just kind of present it for what it's worth, because it's things that I'm doing that kind of benefits this idea. So a while back, had transitions occurred, changes happened, mistakes were made. I know I say that a lot, but I don't tell that story only because my past is not who I am. It's who I was. And it's still who I am. It's going to always be something that's seen a lot of times, but it's kind of like having mistakes be made and having things occur kind of gave me an eye to open my mind to new things. Well, while I was in the midst of doing personal rethinking and taking time to myself and figuring out stuff, one of the first things I looked at and something that I evaluated was I wanted to get a Mac. I wanted to get a MacBook. I think at the time I was focused on a MacBook Pro, and I was mainly looking at it as a resource and a tool to, as far as doing music. A lot of people still were doing CDs at that point. Of course, streaming was getting ready to come on the rise, but I didn't really know. So it's like almost, I looked at it and I was like, well, yeah, I got it and I'm good. But I was like, man, if I got a MacBook Air, it would have been the same. It wouldn't have been too big of a difference. But regardless, I made the choice. So that was in 2014. Moved to 2015. I get a job, steady income, kind of had the funds at the time to be able to do it. And I was doing it through a payment option. And I went ahead and said, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and get the Mac. So the Mac was kind of the starting point of the Apple transition. Not too long afterward, my roommate, she had an iPad 2. And this is like the classic iPad. My mom actually has it to this day. And I was, kind of utilizing it. I'm messing around like, okay, I can use this iPad. This is kind of cool. Another option to keep contact, things of that nature. Then I was able to get a iPod Touch. Now, first thing I'm going to go ahead and get out the way. The biggest reason I got the iPod Touch was because at the time I decided I wanted to be a techie and try to do work regarding my iPod Classic that I had. I had an iPod Classic, I think that was 180 gigs, I think. And there was an issue with the screen where the screen didn't display everything properly. So instead of me just dealing with that screen being the way it was, I was like, oh, I'm gonna get a screen, I'm gonna fix it, I'm gonna do my own thing or whatever. Pretty much trash the iPod. So I was like, well, I need an iPod right now to kind of get me through, my possible transition and everything. I won't say I did it backwards, but I did it the way that it worked for me at the time. And it turned out fine in the end. So I'm not like upset or distraught about it. But like I said, I had my Mac, getting a feel for stuff, using programs. Personally, if it wasn't for the Mac, I wouldn't have got introduced to Audition. So shouts to that. So I'm doing that. I got my iPod, had my iPad. Now I'm like, all right, we creeping around the corner. Let's go ahead and do this. Like, if we're in, we're in. So I went ahead, did a huge switch, and I will tell people this to add to the Apple story. I had been an Android user for close to, wow. It's been a while. It's been a good minute. I almost want to say at least 5 or 6 years, if not longer. I'm probably giving a lower amount, but that's what I can think of right offhand. Any of my friends that knew me, I was a G1 user. I had one of the first Android phones, the G1, that had the slide up keyboard. It was kind of like the closest rendition at the time to the Sidekick, which eventually Sidekick did bring out a Android based Sidekick, which I thought was cool. The Sidekick trend didn't stick very long, I think, based on generations and also battery usage. I think that was always a factor. I know this is like a tech sidebar, but it's key to kind of how tech changed the way it did with a lot of companies. So G1, I had an LG, not a Curve. I had like one of the LG phones. I had a BlackBerry. I owned a Galaxy S3, and then I had the Note 4. So I had the Note 4 for a while, and the Note 4 we were close, we was tight, we was kicking it, everything was everything. But I was ready for a change, and I made my change. And at the time, the iPhone 6 had been out for a little bit, and I'm like, okay, this might be the change. And I was, doing a lot of my research, really breaking it down, looking at what would work for me. And I made the plunge, got the iPhone 6. Now, of course, I'm going to go ahead and get this out of the way because I do have the iPhone 7 now. And everyone has their feelings and thoughts about having no headphone jack. I will be very honest with you. Maybe it's just me, but I really don't see a big difference. And part of it is because I was starting to get into the Bluetooth wave at that time anyway, but it was becoming more solidified after I had gotten my iPhone 6, not my 7. So I got the iPhone 6, utilized, broke it in, trying to get accustomed to texting, learning. I personally, before I had the iPhone, I didn't realize the pros and cons of iMessage compared to if you're sending just regular text messages. Because sending text messages, even now with Android devices, if you send from an Android to an Android or an Android to iPhone, there's really no knowledge or awareness of when or how soon that person gets your message, responds, things of that nature. A feature that I had then that isn't really a big pull, because now, there's apps now that can do it, is I used to schedule quotes. I don't do quotes as often now, but there was a point where I kind of was like, oh, I'm not sure how I'm going to do this. I ended up making threads, and some threads I've had to revise multiple times because people would be in the list. I had to take people off the list, adjust the list based on numbers, things of that nature. So eventually that option was solidified. I know a meat of this is iPhone related, but you'll understand where the Apple trend kicks, why the iPhone part of it was like weird and how I did it. So I had the iPhone. I, got into texting, learned iMessage, FaceTime, all that type stuff. My app usage was pretty consistent, and I don't know. Like it's funny to me because last year, and one of my coworkers at the time, she's not, she's no longer there, but I call her my little work sis. She was able to kind of hook me up with a gift card as far as getting Apple Music. So Apple Music, right before, and I'm sorry, backtrack. Before I got Apple Music, the last thing that I had gotten as far as Apple devices was the Apple Watch. Now everyone's on Series 2 and Series 3. I got Series 1. I've had mine for almost about a year and a half. I don't have a big issue with it, but that's me. I'm not really fancy when it comes to, because in most cases it's used for just daily walking, working out. If I'm going to play basketball, if I'm able to wear it, I'll utilize it in that regard. But in most cases, if I'm at the gym, it's perfect. Like you can, set up a workout and let it do its thing, and you just focus on your workout. So I got iTunes and I got Apple Music, and I did, got into streaming music. Many people may be surprised by this. I was not a music streamer. I was Pandora. Pandora was about the max. And when I say I wasn't a music streamer, I was not open to doing a monthly service. Spotify was starting to come up. SoundCloud had kind of put their perks and options in. I know Pandora had Pandora Plus or Pandora One at the time, but I was in that. I'm not paying a monthly fee for this. I don't see the point. I broke out of that spell, and I want to say for Podcast Every Day in August, if you go back, there was a story that I did to kind of give the listeners a feel for where I stood on my Apple Music listening, as well as in the year in review 2017. I bring up what my feelings and thoughts were after having Apple Music for a year. So you push now, it's the latest thing I've gotten, and I want to say, I got it afterward. I bought an iPad Mini 4. Now, let me be fair in saying this as well. A lot of times people buy larger iPads. They want, more, bigger is better, I guess, as the saying goes. But for me, I think I was more inclined to portability as well as simplicity for what I was doing. Because there was a plan for having it, and it's a benefit now looking back on the purchase. Because what I did was I bought the iPad Mini 4, waited a while, turned into an Anchor addict, buying, I think I had a speaker, a power bank, a keyboard holder, a Bluetooth keyboard, and a phone holder, or like a tablet holder. Like it literally is a stand. But a lot of people look at it like, why would you buy a stand? Trust me, you'll say that, and I think of it now, but once you get one stand, you're like, I need 5 more, because they are very convenient in certain cases if you just wanted to just sit there and chill while you do whatever you're doing, because it's like an eye to eye. Like it's that eyesight or eye level of what you're working on most cases. So getting the iPad was helpful because a lot of times if I wanted to do blogs, I could write on the go. I love and don't get me wrong, I love my MacBook. Like I legit have recorded and done a lot with this computer. Even to the point, and I'll add this as well, when I had my iPad 2, I recorded a couple podcasts using that, where I would hook my microphone. I think I had the Samsung Meteor at the time. I would hook it up, it was a little adapter, plug that in, plug in the USB cable, and it was like I was recording as if I was recording a podcast. So, there were things that worked and benefited for different choices and options. So my main point of me telling you this is, if you think that the Apple hype is overhyped, I don't knock you for that. But I will say one thing. I love PC. Like PC for gaming is very beneficial. PC, in my opinion, for, music organization, if you're doing DJing, if you're a podcaster, personally, I'll be honest. I've seen people do it. Podcasting with Windows laptop, I don't know. I probably wouldn't do it. And I know that's kind of a bad thing to say, but I think it would be different for me doing it, because everything as far as setting up when I work on my designs and work on my artwork and sending information over. And that's another thing. Like that's my other Apple hang up too. Sending information to people. If you have another person with a device and you're like, hey, I want to send you something, a lot of times it's much easier for me to do. And I know most cases like, well, yeah, I can just text it to you. And it's like, yeah, that's cool too. But I mean, if I can just go ahead and send it right to you through this app, I mean, through AirDrop. AirDrop to me is a program that Android was getting to the point of doing. And I think Android has it now. But it's like when they did the whole, touching phones back to back, it was like, okay, people really ain't like, I don't know if you know how embarrassing or how weird that looked doing that, but whatever. And I've done it. I did it a couple times. So let me, and I'm saying this because I want to make sure I mention this in my podcast. Any of my listeners or any of my friends who own Android devices, I did not forget where I come from. I still have a Gmail account, and I was joking on people who had Apple devices and were saying, even if you have an Apple device, you still have a Gmail account. Same applies with me now. So point being, I don't forget about Android. There are things with Android that I love and I always value. But the tech businesses are getting smarter now when it comes to getting certain software, getting products, how you get it. I'm not going to even term that or give it any attention because that's not what my podcast is about. But the option of going Apple for me just worked, especially with getting an iPhone, because a lot of times if I get text messages, if I want to do phone calls, I can literally do everything on my phone. On my computer. I can send information, like if I'm working on my podcast, if I copy something on my computer, it'll paste on my phone. If I'm using things like Evernote, once I update information, I can see it right on my tablet. Like little things like that. It doesn't seem like a lot, but for me, it's been like kind of my simple and fluid way of getting through a lot of the work that I'm doing now. So that's kind of an overall view of kind of like the family tree of me with the Apple Switch. And one last thing, and I'll make sure I'll bring this to attention as well. When Apple made the acquisition with Beats, that was a win-win. Before I was even looking at Beats products, but now with me being a Beats person, I wear my Beats Pros when I'm doing podcasts. Lately, I've been switching it up for better or for worse, not breaking apart. I'm looking at my other headphones like it's not personal. It's just what the moment is. But I love my like my Power Beats 3s are my everything, and my Beats X, love them. I utilize both off and on. It's very easy if I'm listening to something on my phone and I'm like, you know what? Let me disconnect it. Or I don't even a lot of cases I don't even have to disconnect from my phone. I can just go to the other device if I'm using my iPhone. If I'm using my iPhone and then I want to look on my iPad, I can go on my iPad, pair up with my Beats that way. And it's easier for me to do. And that's something that I think that was where the whole Apple and Beats acquisition came into play. And then of course with music, I will say this, and this isn't a knock, it's just something that I've considered and understand a lot better. Android is always giving you the option to play your music louder, because they say, okay, if you play your music past this sound point, you could possibly risk your hearing. I didn't think much of it and understand it back then, because I always was like, screw it, I want to play my music loud. That's what I want. Apple does the opposite, but Apple does the opposite in a good way, because then you still get a loud sound for your music, but your playing of music is limited to the maximum without risking damaging your hearing. And that's something that's very important that I think a lot of people take for granted. But I'm one to tell you, you want to value your listening. And I had to learn that a few years ago, actually twice. If you ever want to go through a horrible experience, and I'm going to leave y'all with this as a weird and random note, go to get your ears clean. You will definitely realize how much little things like earbuds and ear gels and headphones and things of that nature can take its toll on your listening, let alone your hearing for that matter. So quick recap: iPad, MacBook, iPod Touch, didn't need it, still use it off and on. Flaw with the iPod Touch is didn't really get many updates for it after a certain point because they really don't manage or handle it anymore, which is fine. iPhone converted. People were surprised, made the decision, didn't regret it. Apple Watch and iPad, that's mainly the family I have. A lot of people give me a lot of grief, or I was getting a lot of grief about it at a certain point, but it's my choice. And if you don't like it, you can buy many other products, but I will take sporadic updates that don't happen as frequently compared to constant Windows updates with PC. So that's what I have for you all today. As always, and this is probably one of my longer ones for PETA, but as always, thank y'all for tuning in. You can go back and listen to any previous episodes. We started from 157 up until now. So if you want to, 157 up to 179 are all of the episodes for Podcast Every Day in April. The Tuesday episodes, you will see a gap if you look at them because they will go into the sports queue. Tomorrow's show, I'm working that out and getting that all capped up and finished, but we should have a good show on standby. And most importantly, the podcasts are uploaded on Spreaker.com. If you're looking to listen to shows, you can listen to them there. If you have an iPhone or if you have Apple capabilities with iTunes, you can go to iTunes and follow my or subscribe to my podcast, and also leave any feedback and worthwhile input. Until next time, y'all take it easy. The Paz signing out. The one point of the show I don't like to reach, but every show must have an ending. So you have made it to the end of yet another episode of the Podcast Every Day in April. Continue to tune in. These will be going on from April the 1st until April the 30th. And I will guarantee you that there will be plenty of content and more than enough information to share and address during this show. Thanks for tuning in.